Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Al başla.
Konuşmaya başladı. بسم الله. الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. تحية متجددة لكم جميعا، السادة والسيدات الكرام والكريمات الحاضرين معنا هنا في المنتدى السابع، المنتدى كوالالمبور للفكر والحضارة. الآن مع جلسة مميزة باللغة الإنجليزية يؤثثها نخبة من المفكرين في العالم الغربي من دول مختلفة. سعيد جدا في بداية هذه الندوة أن نرحب بهم جميعا باسمكم، وخاصة للدكتور سامي العريان مدير مركز دراسات الإسلام والشؤون العالمية جامعة صباح الدين زعيم بإسطنبول تركيا، الذي سيدير هذه الجلسة، وأدعوه إلى المنصة مشكورا، جزاه الله كل خير.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. اللي يحتاج جهاز ترجمة هنعطيه دقيقة يجيب جهاز ترجمة، لأنه هذه الندوة ستكون باللغة الإنجليزية. This panel is going to be in English, so for those who want a translation device, please go and get one. I first want to thank all the audience for being with us today on the anniversary or the eve of the anniversary of Toufan Al-Aqsa. Certainly, Toufan Al-Aqsa is a watershed moment, not only in the history of this region, but also, I believe, in the history of the world. And this panel is designed to address this issue, which is the impact or potential impact of Toufan Al-Aqsa on the international order. We have distinct speakers with us who come from the United States, Brazil, France, and Turkey. It is indeed my pleasure to invite to the stage Francois Bourgard, Francois, Pepe Escobar, Dr. Mehmet Ali Bukara, and we also have two distinguished speakers from the United States who will join us online. Scott Ritter and Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. Can we have them on the screen, please? While they are preparing the online speakers, I will introduce each of our distinguished speakers. Dr. Francois Bourgard is a former senior researcher at one of the most prestigious institutes in France called the Institute of Research and Study on the Arab and Islamic World. He was there for many decades, and he will speak to us about the impact and implications for the European Union, particularly with reference to France, the impact of Toufan Al-Aqsa. I also have Pepe Escobar. Mr. Escobar is an independent geopolitical analyst and journalist who comes to us from Brazil. He has many books and a regular columnist on global affairs, particularly on the Global South and BRICS. We also have Scott Ritter. Scott will speak to us about the US and future directions of the international order after Toufan Al-Aqsa. Scott is a former US intelligence officer and also a former weapons inspector, and he is a critic of US policy for a long time, particularly in this region. And we also have with us a distinguished speaker, Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. Colonel Wilkerson will speak to us on from state-sponsored torture to genocide implications for the United States. Of course, Wilkerson Colonel Wilkerson was the chief of staff at the State Department during the first Bush administration, with General Colin Powell as the Secretary of State. The name of the panel, as I said, is about the impact of what's going on since Toufan Al-Aqsa under international affairs. Each speaker will have about 18 minutes, and then we'll engage into discussion. I will give you a 2-minute warning when it is time, just in case you are going to pass that limit. And I would like to start, let's see, with Colonel Wilkerson. Can you hear me, Colonel? Sorry? Oh, this is Scott. But Scott, I wanted Scott to be last, if he doesn't mind. Is Colonel Wilkerson online? No? He cut off? Okay, all right. So we'll start with Francois, and then we'll come back. Scott, do you mind if you speak last?
I'm at your disposal.
Thank you very much. All right. Francois, the floor is yours. 18.
minutes. السلام على الجميع. Thank you, Dr. Sami. قبل أن أنتقل إلى اللغة الإنجليزية، اسمحوا لي جملة أو جملتين باللغة العربية. I will translate myself, my poor Arabic in my poor English, don't worry. بعد ما أشكركم كل منظمي هذه الندوة، أريد مبدئيا أن أقول يعني تصريح صغير مهم بالنسبة لي، ربما ما يعجبك هذا التصريح، إذ ما أريد أن أقول أن لست من مؤيدي الفلسطينيين، ولست من مؤيدي العرب ولا المسلمين. معنى وجودي أمامكم اليوم أنني من مؤيدي الحق والمبادئ الإنسانية العالمية المشتركة بيننا وبينكم الجميع، وشكرا. And now I switch back to another foreign language, which I know not even more than my poor Arabic. First point would be, what did we learn? What did we learn since 7th of October? Let me tell you a secret. My Facebook account has been strictly restricted 3 days ago due to the fact that I published an extract of one of my previous books where I describe my personal meeting with the Sayyid Hussein Nasrallah in Beirut in 1992. And, you know, at that time I wrote, I felt some respect for this person, and this respect has been growing. This is too much for Facebook. It's too much for Facebook, so I've been considered promoting, in Arabic you say tamjid al-irhab. It is an expression which I know very well, because I will follow up on my situation, where am I speaking from, and tell you that I have been taken into custody 2 months ago. I had to leave, you know, my shoes, my belt, of course, my telephone, and I was locked in a cell. And my crime as a French citizen, what was it? One tweet, only one tweet where I expressed, and I did not intend to be provocative. So I said, you know, in fact, I feel much more respect for Hamas leadership than I do for the Israeli leadership. In France des droits de l'homme, believe me or not, this has been considered enough for a Jewish organization, the Jewish European organization, to complain, and for the French judiciary to take me into custody. And until now, I am still waiting the result. I might be taken to court or not, but yet I do not know. So what did we learn? I mentioned my Facebook account. Why? Because this morning I wrote one sentence. When I was listening to all these brilliant people in the introductory session, I said, what has 7th of October given to us as a lesson? And I said, it has completed, because I started saying it has demonstrated that the right of the West to be universal was a fiction. Then I said, no, it's too weak. It has completed the demonstration because many people knew that the so-called universal values of the West were one-sided values. We say in French, la France des droits de l'homme blanc, human rights of the white man, but it would not go beyond. And I do not respect my roadmap, but I move to another idea. Very often when I want to compare to the policeman who interrogated me, you know, the stupid questions, do you consider Hamas is terrorist? Blah, blah, blah. I said to the policeman, you probably know the name of a famous terrorist. He is General de Gaulle. General de Gaulle was considered a terrorist by the Germans, of course. And General de Gaulle in 1967, he said, be careful. If there is occupation, there will be repression. If there is repression, there will be resistance. And if there is resistance, the occupier, the colonizer, will consider it terrorism. Okay? So I wrote in my Facebook page, 7th of October has completed the demonstration that the West, the US, and Europe, and if I may say so, some of their allies have not the right to refer to universal principles. It's finished. It's over. They have withdrawn, the West have withdrawn in the limit of its primary ethnic belonging and in the limit of its tribal belonging. So this is what I consider the crisis has taught to us. The main effect has been to reveal the deep-rooted motivations of the conduct of many state actors, Western actors on the one hand, and non-Western actors on the other hand. I will not forget them. I will not forgive them. These behaviors from Norway to Saudi Arabia, from Spain to Morocco, from South Africa to United Arab Emirates, they have proven remarkably different and sometimes counterintuitive. The difference in the reaction of these states, they reflect their differentiated receptivity to the Israeli narrative. Or it reflects a different conception of basic human rights. I have been asked to cover the whole of Europe because the limited time and because I'm a little more documented when it comes to France, my country, I've decided to cover Europe, but through the main example of France. I think that the attitude of France, first of all, is very close to the attitude of the EU. At a time when the attitude of France is not similar to the one of Spain, Norway, Ireland. But the position of Norway, Ireland, and Spain is far from the global position of the EU. So stressing the French or EU attitude is taking us to the core of my paper. How does it express itself, this blind or almost blind support to Israel? Maybe you have read that since 48 hours, there's some tension between Macron and Netanyahu. That's a big joke. It's a big joke. But Macron is trying to develop some tension with this person he has always labeled my cher ami Bibi, my dear friend Bibi. So we had, for years, we had my dear friend Bibi. And during the last 48 hours, there seemed to be some tension on the strategy of Netanyahu in Lebanon. So first of all, how does it express this European position? Historical amnesia. 7th of October is the beginning of everything. There is no history. There is no previous history. Then there is criminalization of the Palestinian leadership in the name of its being Islamist, Islamic. This is a specificity, especially within the French discourse. And of course, there is a complete double standard when it comes to evaluating the victims on one side and on the other side. We know every single detail of every life of every Israeli soldiers, and there are so few who have passed away, and we know nothing about 40,000, maybe more, probably more Palestinians. The attitude is to, of course, to comfort the Israeli propaganda. You know, the story of a baby burned. This has been repeated by officials, both in the US, Biden has done so, but the French have done as well, Europe has done as well. The head of the European Union has mentioned it as a piece of demonstration at a time when we knew it was fake news. Lip service for limited humanitarian preoccupations, and of course, total lack of sanctions against Israel, total lack of progress in the process of recognizing Palestinian state. Now, just Bain Qawsayn, why is it that Ireland, why is it that Norway, why is it that Spain have a slightly different position? Norway and Ireland, they have experienced foreign colonization in some way, foreign occupation. And Spain, and I have seen many examples of this, Spain has the sound of Al-Andalus in its memory. At a time when we, the French, and the US, they have been the colonizers. They stand on the side of the colonizers in North Africa, in Algeria. And I often refer to 7th of October, comparing it to this brief intifada, or intifada is a word you may not pronounce if you are a French, okay? This would take you to court. A brief intifada of the Algerians, and they killed a few dozens or a few hundred colonizers. And the repression went up to probably 40,000 Algerians right after the end of World War II. So this is the French landscape. I could keep giving you details, but I think that my added value will be to tell you the background of this evolution. Why is it that it happens, okay? And this works specifically for France, but it works also for the rest of Europe. France public opinion, France political landscape has evolved in two directions, the right and the left. The right and the extreme right. Let me make a very simple example. Jean-Marie Le Pen, the guy who founded the extreme right party in France. Do you think he would support Israel? No way, never. At a time when his daughter, who founded the Rassemblement National, the heir of Front National, blind support to Israel. Why? If you understand this, you understand all of my paper, all of what I intended to tell you, okay? The extreme right. Before World War II, they had a scapegoat, the Jewish. In the historical frame of decolonization, the extreme right and the right, and Al-Aqsa, some of the left, they moved from anti-Semitism, the right one, this word deserves to exist because anti-Semitism has existed. They slowly moved from anti-Semitism to anti-Islam, anti-Muslim. But beware, the fracture with Muslims is not a religious factor. Being a Muslim in France nowadays is not having a different perfect. I'm sorry, maybe some Muslims, they don't like my explanation. But if you are an African in France, your skin is dark, you're not a Muslim. You have to face the same segregation, the same discrimination, the same hostility at both social and political level. So I think the Muslims, they are the flag of the decolonized. The problem with France now is that they refuse the idea that the people upon whom they have been in a situation of hegemony, they raise their voice. They ask for their rights. They ask, the rest of what they ask is the right to write this page of history of their relation with the colonizer. And so the extreme right and the right, they slowly moved from anti-Semitism to anti-Islam. How many minutes? 2. The left, what did they do, the left? The left, starting in 2006, Hamas, intikhabat, the victory of Hamas. The left, they said, oh, we can no longer support Palestinians. There's too much religion in the discourse. And we, the French, we have our laïcité. Since during the revolution, we had to get rid not only of the king, but of its ally, the church. So the left, she says, I can no longer support Palestinians, they are too religious. The limit of the logic of this discourse is that they support Israel and that can be more religion in the Zionist discourse than there is in Hamas discourse. Of course not. So the root causes, and this will be my conclusion, the root causes of the situation we are facing in France, specifically in Europe, comes from the background of decolonization. The West refuses to move away from its period of hegemony and rejects the Muslim. And my sentence of conclusion will say it all. They do not support Israel as a Jewish state. They support Israel as an anti-Muslim state. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Francois. I guess if there is a main point of his remarks is that as far as Europe is concerned, we're dealing with a situation of a colonizer versus the colonized, and with a laissez-faire or total secular state taking an adverse position against a group who profess to become or to be religious. I think that's the main point he's trying to point out. Our next speaker, we're going to have discussion, of course, but our next speaker that I introduced earlier, I'll introduce again, is Colonel Lawrence Wilkerson. Colonel Wilkerson, as I said earlier, was actually the chief staff of the former Secretary of State, Colin Powell, and he has been a severe critic, not only of U.S. policy in this region, but this liberal hegemony that has been advocated by both Democrats and Republicans in recent years. He's also taken a strong position against the Iraq War, same as Scott Ritter. The title of his address is From State-Sponsored Torture to Genocide, Implications for the United States. Colonel, welcome, and you have 18 minutes rather.
Thank you. Are you hearing me okay?
Yes, floor is yours.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the Center for Islam and Global Affairs for their invitation to join this distinguished group of speakers, despite the fact I'm so far away. And particularly, I want to thank Professor Dr. Sami Alarin for tolerating my need for video teleconference participation rather than physically being in Istanbul. I assure all of you I would dearly love to be with you in person and to be in Istanbul in particular, but my 80 years of life now preclude much travel these days, particularly distant travel by air. Your task in this gathering is formidable. I'm sure you're all aware of that. Trying to make some sense of this world that, as Wang Yi, a really accomplished diplomat whom I've known for some time, I had policy planning talks with him in Beijing, along with Ambassador Richard Haas in the summer of 2001, and then subsequent talks in the United States as well. He's not just a foreign minister type anymore. He's a plenipotentiary and probably will be perhaps one of the only or few Ministry of Foreign Affairs people elevated to the Politburo in China. Wang Yi said this the other day, it's not a world anymore where one or two powers could somewhat dictate what the rest of the world did or accepted. It is a world where that sort of diktat is gone, perhaps for a very long time, Allah willing, perhaps forever. It is, in the fashion of the academic times, a multipolar world. Of course, it still remains to be seen and proven that such a world is a better world, and particularly what that better might mean. Clearly, for the American empire, if it ever did, however, evanescently enjoy supreme power, that moment has vanished in the smoke of its grievous strategic and geopolitical eras since about 1994 and the ascendance to the throne in Washington, as it were, of an Arkansas neophyte named William Jefferson Clinton, who did far more than just get mixed up with a White House intern in a salacious sexual relationship. He put America on its current highly destructive foreign and security policy path, starting with his ferocious effort to expand the NATO alliance, an effort fueled at its peak by defense contractors in the United States, lusting for the contracts they might obtain with additional countries in NATO. But my president, so to speak, and here I refer to George W. Bush, the one who appointed me politically to be in his administration, my president took the tragedy of the terrorist attacks on America on 11 September 2001 and turned them into national motivation to run berserk across the globe, the so-called global war on terror. From Guantanamo Bay to Abu Ghraib, from Afghanistan to Iraq, from state-sponsored torture to targeted assassinations, from flagrant contravention of the U.S. Constitution to lying to the legislative branch as a routine practice, my administration set new lows. And the three administrations since, in spite of the initial promise of Barack Obama to be different, really just doubled down on such nefarious policies and actions, both domestically and internationally, from the use of national security letters to the use of remotely piloted vehicles, we call them drones, to murder even its own citizens, to the use of the NATO alliance to make a basket case of the state of Libya. I recall as a military professional some degree of skepticism and then horror when I learned that the pilots who led the bombing for NATO on Libya were Norwegian. What a far distance Norway had come from its original conception of its security. And the United States was supremely influential in helping Norway to make that transition. And today, Obama's successor, indeed his former vice president, Joe Biden, is embarked on a journey into an even deeper hell that, of all things, he seems to relish directing, to wit, an utterly absurd but very dangerous conflict in the heart of Europe, and a declared genocide in the Levant, both of which are America's wars, even more than they are the comedian Zelensky or the Zionist mass murderer Netanyahu's, both men merely the instruments of American policy. And this demarcates, apparently, the necessity for Joe Biden of this insane journey. Thus, we have the only member of the Biden administration who has apparently some inkling of the hell into which America is descending, telling recently the IDF leadership to its face, Yoav Gallant, that diplomacy is the only answer and a ceasefire is urgently needed to allow that diplomacy to take shape. And oh, by the way, he said to Yoav Gallant repeatedly, your civilian casualty count is way too high. This, of course, was Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, who has, we might say, a vested interest in this journey. He did this only the next day to have that same IDF leadership, whom he had lectured rather sternly, expand its already losing war effort in Gaza into Lebanon, where 3 times in the past, 1978, 1982, and 2006, it has attempted a similar bloody and brutal experiment, only to, in its own way, be rather soundly defeated each time. No doubt this time's defeat will be propagandized, as usual, as a victory, though this time the defeat might be so resounding that even the formidable skills at deceit of the Israelis might not prove sufficient. Their propaganda machine, as has been spoken of, I'm sure here, and I just heard a little bit of, is awesome. And we help them with that, of course. And pray tell, where does this all leave the empire, the American empire? In an awful mess, to say the least. Indeed, far worse than today's mess. Today, Sunday, 6 October, here in the U.S., marking the end of a calendar year of the war initiated by Israel on Gaza, we are poised in both theaters of war, Ukraine and the Levant, to expand into unknown and very dangerous realms, including the potential for the use of nuclear weapons, and most certainly the addition to the total of 9 nuclear weapons-owning states of Iran, followed post-haste, no doubt, by Saudi Arabia. Either that later development or a horrendous bombing campaign on Iran that will solve nothing and will actually hasten the nuclear weapon. Does Iran want this? Does Washington want this? Does NATO want this? Does the majority of the world want this? Probably not. But Bibi Netanyahu does, and as we all know, he usually gets what he wants. In this military professional's mind, how is this likely to develop? Bibi has told us he will respond to Iran's latest attack, and the response will be fierce, so much so that Iran will dearly regret having attacked Israel directly for a second time, though after Israel's depredations vis-a-vis Tehran, including the brutal, uncalled for, and disastrous to diplomacy assassination of Ismail Haniyeh on the evening of the inauguration of Iran's new president, we can readily understand why Iran attacked. But we also understand why Bibi must respond. The cul-de-sac into which he has marched himself will allow no other outcome. Let's go back a bit, militarily speaking. Israel conducted airstrikes on Yemen's port of Hodeidah and on Houthi facilities otherwise. These strikes and the distance they covered in the air-to-air refueling they required demonstrated the long legs needed to strike Iran. Israel was sending this message to Tehran and only secondarily seeking revenge on the Houthis, such a robust group of people that I doubt it even affected them. It, of course, did demonstrate, if any demonstration were necessary, the ruthless killing of civilians and bombing of civilian infrastructure that seems Israel's real military forte today. Now, such strikes are in the planning stages for Iran proper. They have been all along, of course, so I should say they are now plans to be executed. What might the targets be? Oil facilities, first and foremost, and think about that just for a moment. The winner of the second Iraq war, the 2003 unwise invasion by the United States, illegal invasion, according to Kofi Annan, Secretary General at the time, turned Iraq's oil over to not ExxonMobil, not Total, not any private company, nor any nation in the group of allies the United States likes to sport. China is the major benefactor of Iraqi oil now. Oil that will one day, if things continue as they are now with increasing production, surpass Saudi Arabia's oil. So China will not like Israel attacking the facilities. How about Iran? taking on Saudi Arabia's facilities, as they have once before, in a sort of piecemeal fashion. Plus, as I said before, as many civilians and civilian assets as the Israeli Air Force can encompass will be taken into bombing campaigns too. Think Lebanon and all 4 invasions. But all of this, no matter how dramatic and damaging it appears on CNN, Al Arabiya, Al Jazeera, whomever might cover it, will not do the job on Iran when Israel attacks. It will only solidify a somewhat fragmented country, make almost 90 million people truly angry, 90 million people, 52 or 53% of whom are Persian, and so that enhances the homogeneity incredibly. It will reinforce the whole of the theocracy in Tehran, a whole that after the recent revolt of the women was seriously fragmenting. It will also force Iran's scientists deep underground, and a nuclear weapon will be forthcoming. A weapon to this point Iran has not made a decision to build, and in fact, its leading Islamic scholars have said would be anathema to Islam. They will nonetheless, under duress, build it. Enter the empire. Joe Biden has said as much, however, he couched it reluctantly. The empire will either jump in on the Israeli airstrikes, a bit tardily because Israel has of late not informed the U.S. of such spectacular expansions and escalations of the conflict in the Levant, or the empire will take its time and mount its own extended, around-the-clock bombing campaign in an effort, fruitless though it will be, to knock out completely Iran's nuclear weapons program. Well, where does that leave the region and the world, for that matter? For certain, embarked on a new nuclear weapon building and acquisition era. Saudi Arabia will ask Pakistan to make good on its contract to supply Riyadh with operational weapons immediately. The little Sparta, the United Arab Emirates, might do so as well. That's 3 more nuclear weapons owning states in a very, very short time, and it's a brand new situation in the Levant. A standoff of immense terror, if you will, and Israel's already having 200 to 300 nuclear weapons makes me truly, truly concerned in that regard. I think of Masada and some zealots on top of the mountain and the 10th Roman Legion at the bottom, and the zealots on the top of the mountain killing themselves en masse. Israel, as a Jewish state, is finished. When its leadership becomes acutely aware of this, what will it do? I have said this many times in the past. 6 years ago, I said Israel would not be a state within 20 years. I've amended that. It will not be a Jewish state very much longer at all. It cannot survive as such. It could survive as a liberal democracy were it to be Israel-Palestine or Palestine-Israel and be a genuine liberal democracy, but I don't think it's aiming at that. So it will not be a state much longer. I leave you to contemplate the answer to the question as to what will happen once we start these strikes on Iran. And I'll cease my military possibility explanations or exploration. Let's return to the empire, a total lack of diplomacy, and the other theater of war in the heart of Europe, Ukraine. There it is only a matter of time until the comedian Zelensky is assassinated, runs away to one of his well-stocked dachas, or is in some other way no longer Ukraine's leader. Knowing Ukraine the way I do from my time at the State Department, dealing with its deeply corrupt leadership, 2002 to 2005, everyone from Yanushchenko to Timoshenko, Yulia Timoshenko, a coup d'etat of the sort we effected in 2014 will bring in a new leader. Note, I said we effected in 2014. Even the very grievous situation right now on the battlefield, and it is grievous, Ukraine is losing very badly. This leader will have one pressing mandate: in the war and on the most favorable terms possible for what is left of Ukraine, which is actually quite a bit, defying U.S. predictions about Putin's aggressiveness. An immediate ceasefire will be agreed. Negotiations will commence, and I can describe the outcome, I think, with some precision. The first thing they will do whether it's a military government or a civilian government, is lift martial law so Ukrainians won't feel so oppressed. And they will probably agree to just about anything Putin wants, which is essentially just those Eastern Oblasts that would have threatened him if the United States, which it clearly intended to do, had placed weapons capable of delivering INF type, intermediate nuclear force treaty type nuclear weapons on Moscow. That was Putin's main reason for the invasion in the first place. Well, as this goes on and ends this tragic killing of both Russians and Ukrainians in the heart of Europe, what will the empire be doing? Won't its word be necessary here? Won't its NATO partners' word be necessary too? Well, first of all, they all will be eating crow, as we say in the United States. What that means is getting your comeuppance, admitting your mistakes. First, they will find that Putin will go no further. Even President Biden has said, oh, poor Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland, and other NATO countries will be attacked by Putin. He's just another Hitler. That is all patent nonsense. Putin has said categorically again and again and again, and with a hell of a lot more precision than Adolf Hitler did, that he wasn't interested in going further. He was just interested in existential threats to the collective Treaty Security Organization, the CSTO, the organization that is the counterpart of NATO, if you will, with Russia as its major power. So that'll be a big embarrassment. Second, Ukraine will be able to ask for a few things, probably like perhaps referenda in 10 or 15 years in those oblasts. I have news for Kyiv. The referenda will probably, as in Crimea, show they want Russian affiliation or neutrality and not affiliation with that corrupt capital of Kyiv. Russia might even, if they're asked nicely, pitch in on helping to rebuild the portion of Ukraine that remains. Russia wants back into Europe. Or you might say Russia wants into Europe. They were briefly there from about 1992, 3, 4, till Clinton came on board for a few years afterwards. They want back. Germany will be key, absolutely key. And in that regard, the political developments in Germany of late are not that hopeful. But I do think the realities of this winter will cause them to realize they need to get back on Nord Stream, and they need to have that gas and oil flowing again. France will probably follow suit, and we need desperately a European security identity, ESI, we called it in 92 and 93, and we were fully intent on developing a European security identity, realizing that NATO would probably disappear one day and the Europeans needed to stand up on their own feet and provide for their own security. It wouldn't mean a rupture of the transatlantic link. We'd still have finance. We still have finance and economic and trade ties. So NATO will be falling apart and then gone. Turkey has already unanchored its southern flank and will take the most potent land army out of NATO's ranks. More potent than the U.S. Army, and therefore lies a tale in which I dare not enter the telling of. There's too little time. But the transatlantic league did not have to go with it. It will remain. This all might sound too good to be true, and probably is, given the idiocy in Washington. It all has to get past the empire, and that's a real challenge because it assumes much better and wiser leadership in Washington. And we're still cursed with the killer in the Levant. I'll leave a solution to that imbroglio to better minds than my own, for I think we're there headed for disaster. Thank you.
شكرا لكم لإعطائي هذه الفرصة. فقط في دقيقة، باعتبارك من خلفية عسكرية ونظرا لخبرتك الدبلوماسية أيضا، وهذه كلمات قوية، إلى أي حد واسع هذا الرأي منتشر بين الناس في الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية الموجودين في مراكز القوة؟ هل هذا رأي يعني شاذ الذي تقوم به أم أنه هذا رأي يشاطرك به الكثير ممن هم موجودون في مراكز صنع القرار، ليس بالضرورة العسكريين والسياسيين وإنما في المراكز الأخرى؟ معك دقيقة واحدة للإجابة على هذا السؤال لو سمحت. كولونيل، هل سمعت سؤالي؟ كولونيل ويلكنسون، هل تسمعني؟
Yes.
You hear my question? I was.
هل سمعت سؤالي؟ كنت أطرح عليك سؤالا عن بأن ملاحظاتك هل هو منتشر بشكل كبير بين العسكريين وصناع القرار خارج السياسيين، أم أن أنت صاحب رأي شاذ وهذا الرأي لا يشاطرك به الكثير؟ إذا كان لك أن تعطينا يعني فكرة عن ما يفكر به الناس فيما يتعلق بمستقبل إسرائيل ومستقبل الإمبراطورية الأمريكية.
Someone going to translate?
Move on and then I will ask you
طيب،
that question.
يبدو أنه لم يسمع السؤال وسوف نطرح هذا السؤال لاحقا. والمتحدث التالي بيبي إسكوبار وسيتحدث عن تبعات نشوء البريكس الجديد.
السلام عليكم.
السلام عليكم. إنه لمن دواعي سروري أن أعود إلى إسطنبول الحبيبة، والتي بالنسبة لي هي بيزنطة والقسطنطينية. لقد سمعنا وجهة نظر الغرب، والآن سوف أتحدث عن البقية وهم الغالبية على مستوى العالم، وسوف أحاول أن أكون موجزا ومباشرا في الحقائق التي أسردها. أعتقد أن مقدمتي سوف تثير انتباه العديدين منكم. لقد ولدت في أحد دول البريكس وهي البرازيل، غادرتها قبل وقت طويل وأتابع قريبا جدا من أخرى روسيا، إيران، و في البريكس، لأنني أعمل عقود في آسيا وأسافر في أقطارها، ومنذ وقت وأيضا لفترة طويلة عشت في هونغ كونغ، أي تقنيا في الصين. وعلى مدى السنوات الثلاث الماضية انتقلت إلى إسطنبول، والتي أمضي فيها نصف عامي، وكذلك إلى موسكو في روسيا، والتي أمضي فيها النصف الآخر، لأنني أسميها عاصمة العالم متعدد الأقطاب أو متعدد العقد إن صح التعبير، وهو التعبير الذي استخدمه الوزير نيومان، وهو أكثر دقة من استخدام تعدد الأقطاب. إذا دول البريكس إن أهم حدث في هذا العام بل على مدى الأعوام الأخيرة هي المتوقعة بعد إذا وكذلك ترسيخ
silent on the genocide in Gaza now.
إزاء الإبادة الجماعية في غزة، والآن حيال ما يجري في لبنان أيضا، والقرارات وخطة العمل التي سوف تصدر عن تلك القمة بعد أسبوعين سوف تكون شيئا ينطبق عليه أنه له ما بعده ومغير بشكل كبير، لأنه سوف يناقش الكثير من الأمور بالتفصيل. وأحد إيجابيات إمضاء معظم العام في موسكو هذا العام الأخير هو أنني تابعت الكثير من النقاشات الخلفية مع هؤلاء المشاركين في بريكس، وكذلك مجموعات العمل التي تعمل في ظلها. ففي أكتوبر 17 من أكتوبر سوف يكون لدى مجموعات العمل الخاصة ببريكس لقاءات في موسكو مع قياداتهم لمناقشة ما سوف يتم استعراضه مع القيادات العليا في 20 من أكتوبر. وفي 18 من أكتوبر سوف يكون هنالك قمة لمجالس أعمال البريكس، أي القرارات الجغرافية الاقتصادية التي سوف توضع على الطاولة، وهذه أحد أعقد المفاوضات التي يمكن تخيلها، لأنهم سوف يسعون بشكل أساسي لتأسيس منظومة مالية دولية بديلة من الصفر. لذلك يمكن أن تتخيلوا مدى تعقيد هذه المسألة. وكذلك بالتأكيد هنالك خلافات ضمن دول البريكس. في وقت سابق من هذا العام كان لدينا لقاء مع السيد لافروف، سيرجي لافروف، والذي أمضى وخصص 1.5 ساعة من برنامجه المزدحم ليجلس مع 8 منا نحن الصحفيين للإجابة على أسئلتنا المتعلقة بقمة البريكس. وقد كان متحمسا جدا، وبخاصة في الأسئلة المتعلقة بروسيا والهند والصين. علينا أن نتذكر أن هذا هو ما يسمى مثلث بريماكوف، الصين والهند وروسيا، والتي كانت ودول الأخرى. ولكن حتى على المستوى غير هذه الدول قاربة جدا، وعندما يكون هنالك خلافات وعن الصين والهند، وتكون روسيا هي الوسيط في حل على الجبهة الجغرافية الاقتصادية، فإن لديهم مجموعة من الملفات التي يعملون عليها، ونحن نتوقع أنهم سوف يتوصلون إلى قرارات خلال أقل من أسبوعين من الآن. ولكن حتى قبل 3 أيام كانت تلك المفاوضات حامية جدا وشديدة التعقيد. كانوا متفقين على ما يريدون تطبيقه، ولكنهم يختلفون حول كيف سوف يتم تطبيقه. وهذا يعني أنهم سوف يحاولون استخدام البريكس لإغراء باقي العالم بالانضمام إلى هذه الغالبية. أحد هذه المشاريع ما يسمى بريكس باي، وهو الذي يحاول أن تجاوز منظومة سويفت لتحويل الأموال. وكذلك منظومة أخرى ليس لها مسمى واضح، ولكن تسمى إمبريدج، وهي منظومة قيد الاستخدام في هونغ كونغ والإمارات والصين. سوف أعطي مثالا بسيطا. تايلاند تشتري النفط من الإمارات العربية المتحدة وتستخدم إمبريدج في دفع عائداتها. تخيلوا لو أن هذا استخدم ليس فقط بين دول البريكس 10، بل أيضا بين غيرها من الدول، وبخاصة في الجنوب العالمي، فإن ذلك سوف يؤثر على الصفقات والمعاملات بالدولار وغيرها من المعاملات الدولية. كذلك هنالك ما نسميه the unit أو الوحدة، أي وحدة التعامل بالصفقات بتجاوز فكرة الدولار، بحيث يكون 40% من الذهب و60% من عملات دول البريكس. فإذا ما نجحت تلك الدول أو أولئك الاقتصاديون بتقديم حزمة لقياداتهم للعمل على تلك البدائل واتسع استخدام تلك البدائل، فسوف تكون تلك الخطوة الأولى الفعلية في تجاوز المنظومة المالية الدولية، وهو أمر ضروري إذا ما أردنا أن نلتف على الهيمنة الغربية الحالية. إن الأمر الآخر إن فلسطين سوف تكون في محور قمة البريكس بعد أسبوعين، حيث سوف تخصص لها جلسة كاملة تضم أعضاء البريكس بالإضافة إلى ما يمكن تسميتهم شركاء البريكس والأعضاء المستقبليون. سوف يتحدثون فقط عن فلسطين وينخرطون في نقاش جاد حولها، وسوف تضم مصر والسعودية. اللي تأتي من
It's a strong practical possibility that can emerge from Kazan as well. Number three, you remember the Beijing Declaration, right? Ismail Haniyeh was among the 14 different Palestine factions that went to Beijing, signed the Beijing Declaration in front of Wang Yi, Chinese foreign minister. So China was putting China's imprimatur on that. We want to work for the unity of Palestine. And you know what happened afterwards. Israel killed Ismail Haniyeh. I'm sure all of you who have a minimal experience of dealing with the Chinese, with the notion of loss of face and with the notion of respect, which is not only Chinese, but it's intra-Asian. I cannot emphasize enough again for you how the Chinese were absolutely furious. The Chinese way, extremely discreet and diplomatic with that. They considered that a slap on their face by the Israelis. Compound that with the, I would say, progressive loss of Taoist patience of the Russians from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to the Ministry of Defense to the Security Council, where all the big guys are side by side with Putin. For instance, the last meeting that they had, I think was 3 years ago, and it was fascinating because Putin started the meeting saying, we're here. The first thing we're going to discuss is alternative payment systems. And he didn't elaborate, and everybody was saying, wow. So something big is coming in Kazakhstan, but with no details. But another something very, very big that is already emerging is even with the extremely powerful Zionist lobby in Moscow, this is a fact. Extremely powerful oligarchs with double or triple passports who do the back and forth, and their allegiance to Russia is not 100% proved. And Putin is on top of them all the time. But some of them are so powerful that they have a getaway clause. It's the case of Friedman from Alpha Bank, for instance. So the Supreme Council, the Security Council is losing finally the patience with trying to contain the Zionist lobby in Russia and looking at the actual procedures of Israel in terms of their partnership with Ukraine. They are starting to get very itchy about it. And this is getting to Putin as well. Putin is losing his patience with the Russia-Israeli relationship as a whole. So this will have repercussions, serious repercussions. And it will have repercussions possibly in terms of course, this is up in the air. There's a lot of speculation. There's no confirmation from the Russian Ministry of Defense of Russia supplying selected high-tech weapons to the axis of resistance. And the soft power of the axis of resistance as a whole, this is also very, very important because it's not only Russia, but it's also China, with both Moscow and Beijing grows by the day, because it also reflects public opinion in Russia and in China on not only Palestine and Gaza, but the axis of resistance as a whole. And the third very, very important element is the fact that Iran now is a full BRICS member and a full Shanghai Cooperation Organization member. So among other things, if we have a demented Israeli response against, let's say, the relatively moderate ballistic missile night against Israel by Iran, they will be attacking BRICS and the SCO, technically. Obviously, they don't know about it because they don't know how BRICS and SCO, the Israelis don't know, and they don't care. It's typical. But this will get things much more serious than they were a few months ago. And the interlocking strategic partnerships with these three top BRICS, Russia, China, and Iran. And the one between Russia and Iran is going to be signed in person by Pezeshkian in a special trip to Moscow to sign with Putin, probably after the BRICS summit. It's a comprehensive strategic partnership that also includes military partnership. And the military partnership is in effect since last year, in fact. It's not going to start now. It's already on and includes transfer of essential Russian weapons and surveillance system. And we still don't know for sure, but it might include hypersonic technology from Russia to Iran. And for instance, last year in March, April last year, there was one of these Iranian delegations was in Moscow, and we were talking to them, and they said, it was fun. The meeting was fantastic. We told the Russians, anything you need, you have it. And they told us the same thing. So this military partnership is on. We still don't know how it's going to be developing from now on, but this is a game changer in itself. So the fact that now we have these three BRICS trying to change the world geopolitically, geoeconomically, and in terms of this profound imbalance, because they now identify directly the fact that US and Israel is the same thing. There's no wag the dog anymore. There's no Netflix manipulation anymore. They know that it's one body fighting one war, subdivided in different latitudes, and for hegemony or preservation of hegemony. And the war is, number one, not only against Russia in the case of the proxy war in Ukraine, not only against Europe. The war in Ukraine is a war against Europe as well, is a war to emasculate Europe and subjugate Europe, which, by the way, is a tactical victory for the moment. And it's a war against China because it eliminates some of the connectivity corridors of the new Silk Road. It's a war against the BRICS. It's not by accident that the three top BRICS, Russia, China, and Iran, are the three top existential threats to the United States. A few months ago. And my American readers, they said, yes, we never read that in the Washington Post. Of course not. You won't. It's Eurasia against NATO-STAN. NATO-STAN is the whole Atlanticist space. Eurasia is everything from here, Turkey, all the way to Vladivostok, and including the Rimland, Southeast Asia. Very, very important, the 10 ASEAN members, which, by the way, at least 5 want to get into BRICS, including Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam. 4 powerhouses in Southeast Asia, my neighbors. My base over there is Thailand. These are my neighbors over there. And when you talk to their diplomats, they say, of course we want to be part of BRICS. That's the future. And it's a way for us to escape the stranglehold of the Americans everywhere. So closing this intro, let's put it this way. We have a practical, and now straight to the facts. In 2 weeks, we're going to have a practical possibility of having a roadmap to try to escape the stranglehold of this unilateral, unequal, and frankly, genocidal system against the whole of the global majority and against the whole of the human. So our role is to follow it and spread the world all around the global majority, because there is at least one possibility on the horizon. Otherwise, you know what's going to happen. Otherwise, one war will continue unabated for the rest of the century. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You have 1 minute, so maybe you can answer my question in 1 minute, which has to do with India. India seems to be also, there's some sort of a crack with BRICS. It does not vote in the United Nations with the majority of the people when it concerns Palestine. The last time it abstained. It has close relationship between Netanyahu and the Prime Minister of India. How would you explain the situation in India today?
Situation where?
India, within the BRICS.
Zach, I didn't talk about probably the most serious internal problem with BRICS, because this has to do essentially not only with Modi and the BJP, but the Indian ruling classes as a whole, which still have a gigantic inferiority complex vis-a-vis the former ruler, the Raj. It's still in their brain. They will never get rid of it, unfortunately. And many of them prefer for India to have the role of a second-class colony to the American system than to be really sovereign. And then it will be betting on BRICS, SCO, and an alternative geoeconomic and geopolitical system. So the internal, it's almost a dystopia inside India is very, very serious. First, they need to solve their internal problems. And this is something that even Lavrov, which is a gentleman always, and even if his relationship with Jai Shankar, the Indian foreign minister, is also excellent, you can detect in some of Lavrov's intonations that I said, yeah, they need to get their act together first. You know?
Okay, thank you. Our next speaker is Scott Ritter. And Scott, as you all know, has been vocal in his opinion about what's going on in Toufan Al-Aqsa. So he will address the future directions of the international order, particularly after what's happening today in the region. Scott, the floor is yours.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I, like Colonel Wilkerson, wish that I could be there in person. Unfortunately, the United States government has seized my passport and I don't have it back yet. But technology allows me to overcome this obstacle. But I would like to say to Turkey, merhaba. I lived in Turkey for a number of years, and I have a deep felt affinity for Turkey and the Turkish people, and I certainly would have loved to have an opportunity to visit again. And I also want to thank Dr. Sami Al-Aryan for inviting me, and I want to congratulate all of the panelists for their outstanding presentations. I've been asked to speak about the United States and the future direction of the so-called international order after Toufan Al-Aqsa, Operation Al-Aqsa Mosque. In order to do this, we need to go back in time to October 2022. Why? That's October 12th, 2022 is when the Biden administration published the latest iteration of what is known as the National Security Strategy document of the United States. And what's important in this document are two things. One, the Biden administration's proclamation that the United States will lead with its values. Now, don't laugh. I know that this is difficult today to comprehend any notion of the United States actually possessing values that might be attractive to people. But in 2022, October, the Biden administration said, we will lead by our values, we being the United States. They also said that the rules-based international order must remain the foundation for global peace and prosperity. Again, looking back from where we are today, the irony that is contained in that statement is remarkable. But what is this rules-based international order that the Biden administration is lauding so much? It's a relic of the Second World War. It is It was derived from a time when the United States was indeed dominant in the world. And in fact, in many areas of the world, the United States was held in high regard. Democracy was something that people aspired to. And the United States built institutions that would create the opportunities for democracy to be spread globally. At least that's what it said on the surface. What it really was this was an opportunity for the United States to assert global hegemony. We did it initially, I think, under maybe misplaced motives, but honorable motives. We felt that we were in an ideological conflict with world communism, with the Soviet Union, with the Chinese Communist Party. And the world was divided into a bipolar reality, us versus them. And so we were promoting our values in opposition to their values. But the world today is a far different place. The Cold War has ended. The Soviet Union has collapsed. China has transformed from Maoist communism to this blend of communism and capitalism that is dominating the world in so many ways. But the United States refuses to adapt to this new reality. We want to hold on to the singularity that is, American hegemony. So the rules-based international order, consists of various institutions and alliances, foremost of which are the G7, the Group of Seven. These are supposed to be the 7 largest or most influential economies in the world. But when you take a look at the G7 today, you'll find that many of the nations don't qualify for membership because they are not in the 7 largest economies in the world. The European Union, originally meant to be sort of the European manifestation of American values, a coming together of European states to reflect a singularity of purpose, cause, ideals, values. NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, ostensibly a defensive alliance, has turned into something far different. It has become the military arm of this rules-based international order, seeking to impose Western values on others, offensively if necessary, both in Europe, witness Serbia in 1999, and outside of Europe, witness Libya in 2011, witness Afghanistan post 9/11, witness ongoing efforts by NATO to make itself relevant in the Pacific. There are financial aspects to this too. The World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, and various non-governmental organizations that operate at the behest of both the United States and this rules-based international order. All of this is a system, an order designed to impose American values, American ideals, American vision, American leadership, American dominance on the world today. October 2022. How does this relate to Al-Aqsa Mosque? Ladies and gentlemen, on October 7th, 2023, the world changed. The world that existed post October 7th will never be the world that the Biden administration envisioned when they published the National Security Strategy document. What Hamas did was challenge everything that the United States said it stood for. What do I mean by that? Let's go break this down further. The key aspect of Al-Aqsa Mosque, of course, is Gaza, Palestine, the Palestinian cause. On October 6th, 2023, the United States, nobody in the world was talking about a Palestine. The world was looking in a different direction. The Abrams Accord, which was put in place by the Trump administration, was the dominant guiding factor. This is something that would see Israel normalize relations with its Arab neighbors. Saudi Arabia was on the cusp of actually doing this. This would have been the kiss of death for the aspirations of the Palestinian people because it would forever consign them to prisoner status within a system of occupation dominated by Israel. Israel would have been legitimized in the eyes of the world. The Biden administration was bragging about, in the G20 meeting in India about India, Middle East, European economic corridor where Israel will factor in prominently. This was so much so that Benjamin Netanyahu pushed aside his normal habit of showing cartoons of Iranian bombs at the General Assembly debate at the United Nations in 2023, and instead showed a map that showed how important this was to Israel. All of that is gone. There is no more talk about an India, Middle East, European economic corridor. That is finished. The concept of Israel being the center of, this unifying principle, economic and political principle that shaped the geopolitics of the region is finished. Why? Because Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, forever changing how the world views this situation. We can talk about the Middle East as a whole. Again, the Abrams Accord, how America was seeking to use that to dominate, to impart its will. It's finished. America's posture or position in Iraq and Syria is not the same today as it was on October 6, 2023. America's position vis-a-vis not just Israel, but Iran is forever changed. But I think the most important thing from, we say Operation Al-Aqsa Mosque, this is about Palestine. Today, the world is talking about a Palestine. It's a difficult conversation, but it's one that wasn't had on October 6th. Today, the world is compelled, because of the actions of Hamas, because of the actions of Hezbollah, because of the actions of Nasrallah, because of the actions of Iran, because of the actions of the militias in Iraq, because of the actions of the axis of resistance, the world is compelled to speak about not only the possibility, but the necessity of a Palestinian state. This has changed everything, because if there is a Palestinian state, and I believe there will be, this fundamentally alters every aspect of intergovernmental relationships in the Middle East that existed prior to October 7th. First of all, Hamas. Israel has said that they want Hamas eliminated. Hamas today survives. It exists. Its mere existence signals the defeat of Israeli objectives in Gaza. You can't deny this. The price the Palestinian people pay are horrible. Their deaths are unforgivable. The genocide is real. But what it has done, Hamas, through its actions, has exposed to the world the reality of Israel, the state of Israel. On October 6th, 2023, the world had been fooled into believing that Israel could be a responsible member of the international community. Today, the world sees Israel for what it is, an apartheid state, a genocidal state, a state with no legitimacy, and a state that's incompatible with the values of the world, not the values of the United States through their national security strategy. When they say the U.S. will lead with its values, the United States has firmly attached its values to Israel. Israeli values are American values, and the world is rejecting Israeli values, which means the world is rejecting American values. And this is one of the main aspects of Operation of Toufan Al-Aqsa, Operation Al-Aqsa. The relationship that the United States has with the world has been fundamentally changed. We are probably going to be evicted from Iraq and Syria in the not too distant future. Our relationship with the Gulf Arab states is fundamentally transformed. Saudi Arabia has not decided that it's going to normalize relations with Israel. The opposite. After the Iranian missile attack, Operation True Promise 2, back on October 1st, first thing that Saudi Arabia did is reach out a hand to Iran and said, all of our differences are behind us. We are now going to move forward together. This was unimaginable in October of 2022. Today, it's the reality. The world is rejecting the United States. The world is rejecting American values. The world is rejecting the rules-based international order. If we take a look at a topic that Pepe Escobar was speaking about, BRICS, the contest between the United States, Russia, and China, and and over the global South, we have lost this. The global South is gravitating towards BRICS, away from the United States. This is the end of the rules-based international order, because the rules-based international order isn't about being a small club of like-minded people. It's about imposing the values of this small club on the international community, and the international community is rejecting these values because these values have been exposed for what they really are by the actions of Hamas on October 7th and how Israel has responded. The United States is a complicit party to the active genocide against the Palestinian people. The United States provides the bombs and the airplanes that are being used by Israel to slaughter thousands of innocent Lebanese. The United States has empowered the Israeli war machine to threaten Iran with a broader regional conflict, which, if they follow some of the targeting guidance that has been suggested by some people in the United States, would include nuclear targets in Iran and oil targets, which, if they are struck, will not only be the end of Israel, because, ladies and gentlemen, Iran will not be defeated by Israel. That is just the reality. The Israeli war machine is incapable of defeating Iran. Iran has demonstrated through its ballistic missile capabilities that it possesses the ability to destroy Israel. But it will also be the end of the global economy, because if the United States and Israel, together or in complicity, attack Iranian oil infrastructure, the oil infrastructure of the Middle East will be put at risk, and the resulting energy crisis will bring down the global economy, especially the economies of Europe, the United States, the rules-based international order. And that's where we stand right now. The G7 is weaker than it's ever been. It has literally no relevance in the world today because its constituent members are dealing more with their own domestic political problems than they are trying to work together to impose American hegemony on the world. The European Union, likewise, is fracturing like it's never done before. Europe is in shambles. Their collective economies are collapsing. Domestic politics and the constituent members are troublesome, to say the least. NATO is weaker than it has ever been. I don't think NATO will survive the decade. It can't survive the decade because it can't afford to survive the decade. The Russian victory in Ukraine, while not completed, will be absolute when it occurs, and this will confront NATO with its own collective impotence. And since NATO is an extension of the European Union and America's national security strategies or national security system, as Europe and America gravitate away from one another, which is natural. One only needs to listen to the recent statements made by Emmanuel Macron, look at the dissatisfaction of Olaf Scholz and other European leaders to understand that they too are losing confidence in this American-dominated system. NATO will collapse. And that's the end of the rules-based international order. And here's what we should be doing. This is a good thing. America had its moment. America could have taken its leadership position and done something with it at the end of the Cold War when the Soviet Union collapsed. America had an opportunity to reach out to the world and say, how can we work together to make the world a better place? Where America has a leadership position, but not a dominant position. But we chose not to do that. We chose to dominate. And the only mechanism that America knows to use to this domination is the threat of military force or economic sanctions. The world has grown up. The world has rejected this. But it always takes that trigger. It always takes something to push the collective over the line to say, we are fundamentally divorcing ourselves from the United States. This is where the world owes Hamas the deepest debt of gratitude. Because what Hamas did by initiating its attack on Israel on October 7th is begin the process of the disintegration of the rules-based international order by compelling the world to see America and Israel for what they are, systems that must be rejected by the international community as being totally incompatible with the values of the global community, of we, the people of planet Earth, not just we, the people of the United States. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Scott. If I have you for a minute before we go into our discussion and our last speaker, actually, how would you define victory and defeat right now in Gaza and Lebanon?
It depends on whose perspective. Let's take it first from the Israeli perspective. They've defined victory as the political and military defeat of Hamas, and they've defined victory similarly for Hezbollah. They're also defining victory against Iran similarly, the demise of the Islamic Republic. Israel is failing regarding Hamas. Hamas today is far more relevant politically than it was on October 6th, and militarily, Hamas continues to resist. Israel will not defeat Hamas, as Israeli generals have acknowledged Hamas as an idea, and you can't defeat an idea with military power. Hezbollah, I think, is even in a stronger position. Hezbollah has been preparing for this very conflict since 2006, when the last Israeli-Hezbollah conflict ended. And I think Hezbollah will survive, will thrive, and will more than likely not just fight the Israeli army to a standstill, but perhaps inflict a strategic defeat on the Israeli military. And Iran has demonstrated that it possesses deterrent superiority over Israel. Iranian ballistic missiles, if used against critical Israeli infrastructure, will destroy the state of Israel as a modern nation state. So Israel will not meet any of its objectives here, none whatsoever. The more difficult ones is how Hamas defines victory. The creation of a Palestinian state, while being discussed today around the world, continues to be a very difficult proposition for the world. What will it be? A two-state solution, a one-state solution? I think Israel, having manifested itself publicly the way it is, has proven that there can never be a two-state solution, because Israel can never be trusted to be a partner in a two-state solution. But how do we move from the world saying we need a two-state solution to the reality of the necessity of a one-state solution? This is going to be, the biggest problem going forward to define victory for the Palestinian people, because the Palestinian people cannot have victory until there is a Palestinian homeland they call their own, without restrictions from an occupying power called Israel, where their capital is in Jerusalem, something Israel says they will never accept. So to have a Palestinian state, we need to eliminate the Israeli state. And therein lies the problem. How does this happen? Fortunately, Israel is committing suicide as we speak, and the collapse of the Israeli state will probably happen from within rather than being imposed on it from without. For victory for the United States, I think trying to salvage as much as we can of our ability to effectively interface with the international community is the best we can hope for. The rules-based international order is finished. We are not part of the BRICS process. We need to find a way to stop the decline of the United States globally and re-enter the world. And we can only do that if we actually have values that the world is willing to embrace. And so long as we have attached ourselves to the state of Israel, our values will never be the same as the rest of the world.
Thank you very much. Please stick around for the Q&A.
Thank you.
Our last speaker is Professor Mehmet Ali Bukhara from Marmara University, and he will speak to us about Islamist mobilization and the Palestinian question in the 40-year international order.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I greet you, respected guests, with this Allah salam, the most merciful. The title of my presentation is Islamic Mobilization and the Palestinian Question in 40-year international order. This 40-year is that of 40-year, you can say 35 years after the Cold War in 1991. After the Second World War, a new world order was created, and it was revised again in 1991 when the Soviet Union collapsed. With the Cold War over, the United States led a new era based on liberal democracy and free markets. The vision for this new world was simple: a fairer, freer, and more peaceful place. Here's what was hoped for. Authoritarian governments will be replaced by democracies. People everywhere will have a voice through free elections and parliamentary systems. Human rights will be strongly protected by new standards, supported by growing civil society. Economic growth, driven by global trade, would improve the lives of the disadvantaged people. None of this has truly happened, especially for the Islamic world, which is the focus of this convention. In fact, we can say that things have gone in the opposite direction. I won't go into all the reasons for this here,
Instead, I will focus on one key question. What was the share of the Muslims in this new world order? And how did they respond or react to it? While the Palestinian issue may be at the heart of these concerns, focusing only on that without looking at the bigger global picture won't give us the full understanding we need. Taking 1991 as a milestone, what tragedies did the Muslim world go through? In Afghanistan, the Soviet occupation ended with the victory of Islamic movements, but this led to a terrible civil war. This first Taliban emirate was created as a political solution to the chaos. Then, after the American invasion in 2001, instability only grew worse, resulting in a new civil war that lasted 20 years. In Algeria, the Islamic Salvation Front won a significant victory in the democratic elections of 1991. However, international pressure, mainly from France, forced the Algerian government not to accept the election results. This led to a military coup that overturned the democratic victory of the Islamic movement, plunging the country into a devastating civil war. After the breakup of Yugoslavia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, where the majority of the population is Muslim, declared its independence in 1992, along with other former Yugoslavian republics. Serbia refused to recognize this declaration and occupied Bosnia. Unfortunately, Western countries did not extend support to Bosnia. This led to 3 years of violent war. The United Nations intervened, but could not even protect the places it had declared safe zones for Muslims. In Srebrenica alone, despite the presence of the Dutch peacekeeping forces, around 8,500 Muslims were massacred in just 5 days. At the same time, Somalia faced a similar tragedy. The United States intervened in 1992 to stabilize the situation and address the widespread famine. However, conditions only worsened. When the US withdrew, Somalia was left in a dire state. The declaration of independence by the Muslims of Chechnya led to 2 costly wars with Russia in 1994. Throughout this tragic conflict, the world's champions of democracy remained silent. Similarly, the Camp David Accords of 1978 did not bring freedom and peace to Palestine. In fact, they made things worse. This frustration led to the Intifada. Hamas was founded after the Intifada 1988 as a key organization representing the movement. Although the Oslo Agreement aimed to end the Intifada, it produced little progress, particularly regarding promises about Jewish settlers and the position of Al-Qudus. The guarantors and the United Nations only offered condemnations without taking meaningful action. As a result, the Second Intifada erupted in 2000. The efforts of Mahmoud Abbas to end hostilities created hope for freedom and peace, giving Palestinians a chance to elect their true political representatives. In the 2006 elections, Hamas won in a landslide, but this victory was not accepted by Israel, Fatah, and the governments of other Muslim countries in the region. As a result, the activities of the newly formed parliament were suspended. This was a serious blow to the democratic choices of Palestinian people, similar to what had happened in Algeria in the past. Since then, the elected parliament in Palestine has not been able to convene. In summary, from 1990 to 2000, Muslims faced various forms of occupation and conflict. The so-called neutral interventions by the United Nations and NATO often made things worse, leading to many massacres. Civil wars devastated Muslim countries, and the democratic choices of the people were ignored, as seen in Algeria and Palestine. A similar situation occurred in Turkey with the postmodern military coup on February 28 in 1997, which removed an Islamist party from power after it had won an election. Let's come to the aftermath of 9/11. The international order established after 9/11 has made the existing situation even more permanent. Radicalism was born from deep victimization, oppression, and despair. It transformed into terrorism through groups like Al-Qaeda. This served as a justification for the illegitimate interventions of powerful nations in Muslim countries, leading to the invasion of Afghanistan and Iraq. Ignoring the democratic victory of Hamas in Palestine is another consequence of this same justification. At the same time, Muslims have been demonized, fueling Islamophobia through a massive global media campaign. Anti-Islamic extremism, which often uses Islamophobia as an excuse, has caused great suffering for Muslims, particularly in countries like India and Myanmar. Under similar justification, the Chinese government has implemented policies that violate the basic human rights of Muslim minorities in that country. We cannot overlook how these developments have influenced Israel's increasingly reckless behavior on the international stage, including practices that resemble the fascism seen in Hitler's Germany. What happened in 2010, Arab Spring and its aftermath? After 2010, the movements toward freedom and democracy in the Middle East, known as the Arab Spring, brought new hope to the Islamic world. The dictatorships that were overthrown and the new political landscape created by democratic elections inspired optimism for the future. No longer did oppressive dictatorships use the Israeli threat as an excuse to control their own people without taking real action for the Palestinian cause. Many reasons that might have pushed some Muslims toward terrorism have also lost their sense. Now was the time to rethink the Palestinian issue on a more equal and just basis in this new political environment. Sadly, the hopes of the Arab Spring have faded, turning it into a time of struggle called winter. The reason for this is that the changes brought by the Arab Spring didn't benefit Israel. And both the US and the West saw it that way. At the same time, the Gulf monarchies feared that the Arab Spring would harm their sovereignty and interests. As a result, in some countries, democratic governments were overthrown by counter-revolutions and the dictatorships came back, like in Egypt and Tunisia. Other countries fell into civil war. like Libya, Yemen, and Syria. ISIS, Daesh, was created as a tool to justify this reversal, and the right conditions were set up for it to rise. Movements like Ikhwanul Muslimin and Nahda and Hamas made efforts to embrace pluralism, reject violence, and push for compromise-based ties. However, these changes became meaningless over time. Armed movements, which had given up terrorism and declared themselves for moderate in what was called muraja in Arabic, were seen as weakness. In some cases, they were accused of betraying Islam. Unfortunately, many people began to believe this view. In conclusion, the region is in chaos again. The US has gained more power in the region, and Israel has become much safer. As a result, Israel is acting more aggressively, being treated more favorably, and ignoring the global concerns. Hopes for a political solution were faded away. In the Aqsa float operation in Gaza aims to break the nearly 40-year cycle of this Islamic world struggles and helplessness, which keeps repeating. This is why it holds great importance. What is the goal of this action? I mean, the float of Aqsa. It sends a message first to Muslims and then to the world that Israel's military power is not unbeatable, rather can be challenged. It brings the Palestinian issue, which had nearly been forgotten by the world, back into global spotlight. The efforts of the Arab world, especially the Gulf countries, to recognize and form alliances with Israel have been fortunately disrupted. Moving forward, it will be much harder for these countries to follow this policy, which goes against the will of their own people. The Muslim world is learning powerful lessons about the merits of self-sacrifice and the fight for freedom and dignity. The Hamas movement, often labeled as an organization of Islamic terrorism, but in reality defending its homeland against colonialism, is gaining legitimacy, but in the gaining legitimacy in the eyes of the global public opinion. At the very least, these negative perceptions should now be questioned. It has created opportunities for people who are often influenced by Islamophobic views to reconsider their perspectives. It has disrupted Israel's internal political balance. It has brought attention to certain theological aspects of Judaism. These aspects that contribute to Israel's extreme and irrational actions, particularly the notion of the chosen nation. The concept of the promised land, Al-Arzul Maw'ud, has also entered people's agenda. I am finished. The Zionist settlement expansion has slowed down. This ends the peace and security of Israeli citizens who are now experiencing the same unease that Gaza and West Bank residents have felt for decades. A global boycott movement has emerged with the potential to impact Israel's financial supporters especially. The support given to Israel by major powers like the US, Britain, France, and Germany has shown that the problem goes beyond Zionism. Zionism is linked to imperialism, making the danger even greater. As a result, many now see that the values often promoted after the French Revolution, like human rights, justice, human dignity, and democracy, are just empty words, not truly upheld. It's my last words is that the struggle is Gaza and continues. I truly believe that more positive outcomes will emerge for Palestinians and Muslims as a whole. Despite the heavy costs, the Aqsa flood will bring even greater results. I am hopeful that this will lead to a good outcome that benefits both the present and the future of the Ummah. The most important achievement will be the opportunity to create a new just world order, and this will start by stopping Israel no matter the costs. I send my greetings to the all participants. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much. We've heard from all our speakers. We have about roughly 15 minutes of Q&A. So I'd appreciate brief answers so we can get as many as possible. I want to start with Francois. We know all the positions of the government, but has there been any change in the attitude of the French population, the populace in general, or is it still the same, being pro-Israel, pro-colonizer?
It's not so easy to give a clear answer, but I will make it short. At least one third of voters are opposed to the right and extreme right understanding of the Israeli-Arab conflict. Now let's be careful, but those who won the elections, those by one third only, because the landscape is not clear, because the right and the extreme right are divided. But if you put them together, the left is a minority. But let's say what is new, at least one third of the public opinion is opposing this line. And the young people, the most brilliant students in Sciences Po Paris or the best of our educational system, they oppose, and they are criminalized. So if there is some hope in the Western landscape, it would be the stronger position of American Jewish, of American academics, and of quite a lot of, I would say, the majority of students in France nowadays.
We've seen also some changes in some attitudes of governments like Spain, Ireland, Belgium, and others. Is that because of Toufan Al-Aqsa, or are there other reasons and currents within these societies that made that significant change?
Well, as I told you, we the French, we support colonizers. The Irish, they have been colonized by the British. So there is an ability for the people of Europe to put the shoes of the colonizer or of the colonized. And of course, in the US, they have our kind of experience. So I would say this is definitely a strong difference between Irish and I said Spain. And just in 2 words, I will tell you, I was staying in Damascus when the Queen visited Damascus, Queen of Spain. And with the Queen, there was a lot of first-rank Spanish politicians. And one of them, when we moved toward Mahattat Dimashq, it's Umayyad architecture. And this Spanish guy, he stood in front of the building and he said, "Oh, this is us. We Spanish, we identify to Al-Umayyin." So I will say, in the alchemy of the evolution of the Spanish public opinion, there is this. Their relation to Al-Andalus is at least complicated. It's not they were the occupiers. Okay? So, yeah, this would be the bright side or the hope side of a very dark landscape, which is dominant.
Pepe, I have three questions very quickly in succession. First one has to do with Latin America. We've seen real change in certain countries when it came to Palestine. Some broke off relations with the Zionist state. Some actually were going to the International Court of Justice, and others. What's going on in Latin America?
A mess, as usual. Well, we have a Jewish colony in Argentina that fell on the American and Israeli lap for nothing. Minimal investment, and they got a whole country led by an absolute lunatic, and very, very dangerous, because now they can undermine Mercosur, they can undermine Brazil, they can undermine the BRICS as a whole. Don't forget that they were invited and they said, no, we're not going. So this is a major problem. This is the second most important economy in South America. The Jewish lobby, I would say the Zionist lobby in Buenos Aires is, wow. It's as powerful as in France, in fact, in terms of controlling.
In Argentina, I mean.
Pardon, I'm sorry?
In Argentina.
Buenos Aires, yeah, capital of Argentina, is that. It's basically, for all of you, Argentina is controlled by 50 families, and not more than that. And nowadays it's controlled by 4, not more than that, you know. The Macri system, before the Kirchner as president, continues. Milei is part of the Macri system. Milei is an invention of Macri, essentially, these people.
What can Brazil do to advance this situation? Anything?
Well, if I say what I really think, I'm going to be hanged. But I don't care anymore. I don't live there anymore, so it's fine. Brazil has no sovereignty, and it pains me to say that. I don't know if many of you remember when Lula was elected, Jake Sullivan disembarked in Brasilia with the list. Literally. Jake Sullivan went to Lula's palace and said, okay, this is what you have to do. Otherwise, we revoke all the support that you received from us. This is the really hardcore version.
And this is because of banks? This is because of financial situation? Why is that?
No, because basically the Democrats helped Lula get reelected. With a few phone calls, they simply crashed the car wash operation, in fact, which was, don't forget, the whole thing, even before the car wash operation, started in the Obama administration in 2010. And then it evolved into the car wash operation. And then the coup against Dilma in 2016. And then when they put Lula in jail in 2018.
Moving on.
Basically, the latest Lula election, you know, the overarching framework of, okay, now he's one of our guys again, let's help him to win, the Democrats in the US, essentially.
This is the question. Moving on to Russia and China, do you think as the two most important countries within BRICS, are we moving into a new world order in which they could be the anchor to that, or are we just far away from that?
It's very complex. What they want is they're working very, very hard in their strategic partnership to at least design the roadmap for an alternative system of international relations and also geoeconomic system. Of course, there are some frictions. I'll give it a practical example. Alternative payment systems or coming up with a BRICS endorsed would not be currency, would be probably the unit, which is the system that the Russians worked for over 1 year. And it arrived at the Ministry of Finance and the Central Bank only a few months ago. The first thing the Chinese says, we're going to be sanctioned by the US. We're going to be victims of secondary sanctions.
I understand. I just want to move on because I got two more speakers.
No problem.
Just in one word, do you think when it comes to Israel, these two countries are willing to confront it with all the means at their disposal? I'm talking about China and Russia.
Not
in terms of sanctions and others, or?
Not yet, Sammy, but we're getting there little by little. I would say each and every day, because both now they have facts on the ground and actions by Tel Aviv that point that Tel Aviv's interests are completely against both Moscow and Beijing.
Very well. Scott, are you there?
I'm here.
All right. Do you think regional war is inevitable? Do you think the United States is going to get involved in a regional war, or under what conditions would the U.S. get involved?
I think regional war is inevitable. We are in a regional war as we speak. We're in the preparatory phases of a regional war. If Israel follows through, and Benjamin Netanyahu has put himself in a political bind because he's committed to a strike against Iran, Iran will retaliate. And if Iran retaliates the way that they say they will, they'll destroy Israel's critical infrastructure, and that will eliminate Israel as a modern nation state with no electricity, no running water. And this will prompt the United States to step up and defend Israel. If the United States does that, then it exposes its regional military posture in Iraq, Syria, and Bahrain, and in the Gulf to Iranian attack. If all the United States has at that point is the ability to take out Iran's energy producing infrastructure, which will require an Iranian response to the energy producing infrastructure in the region, creating a global energy crisis that will collapse the European economy, destroy America's economy, damage the world's economy, destroy the regional economy of the Middle East and in that area. I mean, this is the reality of it. I mean, this is all even without the possibility of Israel using nuclear weapons and forever changing the nature of conflict. And once you open that, you let that genie out of the bottle, we can't predict where it will go. So we're in a regional war. The consequences of this regional war are existential in nature. And I'm hopeful that people will put pressure on Israel not to commit suicide, because literally if Israel attacks Iran, Israel is committing suicide. Some people, Palestinians, Lebanese, might say good, but I'm here to tell you, you will go down with that ship too. A regional catastrophe is a regional catastrophe. Turkey, any ambition Turkey has of being a regional energy hub, being a regional major player, will be destroyed forever because of the consequences of a regional war. So everybody should put maximum pressure on Israel right now not to commit suicide by attacking Iran, because the consequences.
Very briefly, is there going to be any difference between the Trump administration and the Harris administration when it comes to Israel-Palestine?
The difference is Trump, when he becomes president January 20th, will have to deal with the reality of the world as it exists then. You cannot formulate policy today and predict that policy be relevant on January 20th. The world will change dramatically between now and then. And therein lies the differences. The Biden administration the Harris administration will be an extension of the Biden administration. They'll be dealing with the policies that are in play today. If Trump comes in, his administration begins on January 20th, and the world will be a completely different world by then.
My final question to Dr. Biokara, if you can address the question, is you presented a situation where Muslim countries could make a difference, but right now they're making zero difference. What do they have to do to change this world order in a way that they can play a significant role, particularly within structures like BRICS and others?
The first thing is the unity, yes, at the top of the list, unity. It is difficult in that situation because, for example, between Iran and Saudi Arabia, between Iran and Turkey, Sunnism and Shiism, the proxies of Iran, all these things get all the situation worse. Unity in the near future is, I think, not possible. So they try to sit around the table and try to solve their problems first. Then to get this issue on the agenda and try to solve these problems.
Well, I apologize for the audience. I was originally given 2 hours, then we started half an hour late. Then I've been pressed to end this. But the good news is we're going to have another panel at the Istanbul Zaim University on Tuesday that will feature many of our speakers in this conference. I hope people will make the effort to come to that event. It's on Tuesday at 4 o'clock, 4 to 7 p.m., which is a couple of days from now. And it will be open to the public, and we will have plenty of time. We will also feature a film that Max Blumenthal has directed and edited, and it's going to be the first time to be featured, so hopefully. And it's going to answer many of the questions about all the lies and the deceits and the deceptions and the fabrications about what happened on October 7th. So it will be very interesting. Now, I'm willing to stay until tonight. It's just these guys who have been pressuring me. So if you all veto them, I'm here. Wait, I've been asked, I've been allowed to get 2 questions. I can't see, but I see hands. So Dr. Tariq, who else is there? Okay, but I want to see if there is a sister there. If not, then I'll go to him. Okay, خلاص. 1, 2, please. معلش. سامحني.
يعني دقيقتين ثلاثة ما راح يفرق
بس لا تقول لي السؤال لمن؟
السؤال الأول إلى سكوت ريتشر والعقيد لورنس، واحد من هذا سؤالين متداخلة.
فقدناه، العقيد لورنس فقدناه يعني
فقدناه؟ طيب سكوت ريتشر على أي حال، متى يمكن أن يشعر دافع الضريبة الأمريكي أن دعم إسرائيل بلا حدود بات يشكل عبئا ماليا عليه؟
خلينا نترجم لأنه ما يسمع يعرف عربي. خلينا نترجم واحدة واحدة.
يلا.
Right. The first question, Scott, is for you. When do you think the American taxpayer would know or would feel or would be convinced that their financial help to Israel is counterproductive and it's against American interest?
السؤال الثاني، 7 أكتوبر أسقطت نظرية الجيش الذي لا يقهر. فهل يمكن أن تتحول نظرة الغرب إلى إسرائيل باعتبار أن إسرائيل وكيلة لمصالح الغرب في الشرق الأوسط؟ هل يمكن أن يحصل هذا التحول؟
لمن هذا السؤال؟
نفس سكوت.
All right. Second question, Scott, is also for you. Do you think after October 7th, after Toufan Al-Aqsa, the West would realize that the military doctrine of Israel of having an invincible army has been knocked down? Or do you think they still would try to prop it as the army, the invincible army?
Baby اسكوبار بليز. يعني أنا كنت سعيد أنه هناك تحول من خلال البريكس، لكن فوجئت لما ذكر هو قال أن البريكس يشكل نافذة للمستقبل، أن هناك بديل على قطبية الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية. ولكن ذكر بين السطور أن وضع روسيا أيضا دقيق بسبب هيمنة اللوبي الصهيوني على الاقتصاد الروسي. إذا ما سوينا شيء. مشكلة أمريكا الآن مع إسرائيل هي مشكلة اللوبي الإسرائيلي. فإذا تخلصنا إحنا من قطبية الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية جينا راهنا على البريكس، راح يواجهنا نفس اللوب الصهيوني الموجود في روسيا، فكأنما ما عملنا شيء. بارك الله بك.
Okay, the next question is Pepe about the Zionist lobby in Russia. He felt deflated. At the beginning, he had hopes for BRICS. When you mentioned that the Zionist lobby is very strong in Russia, he felt deflated. Are they going to have the same impact like they have in America? Okay, Dr. Abdullah.
I have one question to François Bourga and some question to Pepe Escobar and just one question to Scott Ritz. The first question is to François Bourga. Je vais vous la poser en langue française. Je ne sais pas si vous vous souvenez de moi, je vous avais visité en 90 avec les jeunes de l'UGM de Lyon. Je ne sais pas ce que vous vous souvenez de cela. Alors, la question, vous avez mentionné que l'Occident voit l'autre avec un seul regard. Mais qu'en est-il de l'islamophobie? C'est ça la question. Qu'en est-il de l'islamophobie? Pour Pep Escobar, la première question, the first question, what is the influence of the Zionist lobby in Russia, and is there a Zionist lobby in China? The second question, as long as Iran is a member of Shanghai Organization, will China and Russia ever intervene in America if America attacked Iran? You're talking about this matter technically, but my question, practically, will China and Russia intervene? The third question, I return back with the question about India and the BRICS. Do you not believe that India of Modi is a threat to the success of BRICS in confronting American hegemony? The final question, we talked about BRICS membership as an we talked about Palestine, the membership of Palestine as a member, observer member. Is it possible with the Palestinian Authority? To Scott Ritter, you said that the world rejects American values and rejects America itself. And you mentioned the reasons for that, such as the collapse of values and distance and wars. What makes America remain so strong? Do you expect it to decline, and when will that happen? Thank you very much.
Got the questions, and I don't know how much time we have, but we'll start with Scott. Try to be brief, and then Pepe, and then to Francois.
Okay, I'll do my best to answer the questions while being brief. The Israeli lobby in the United States is extraordinarily powerful. One of the reasons why it's powerful, it's been able to insinuate itself into virtually every aspect of American society. It's able to do this because for decades now, it has convinced America that American and Israeli goals, objectives, and values are one and the same. Today, what we're finding out is many Americans realize that this is a lie, that Israel is not the same as America. Not only is Israel different than America, but Israeli values are harmful to America. And I think you're going to see America slowly but surely separate itself from the pro-Israeli lobby. I only hope that this is done in a way that doesn't promote anti-Semitism. There's a difference between standing up against Zionism and being anti-Jewish. And I'm very concerned in America today that because of the anger that will be manifest toward the pro-Israeli lobby, that this could lead to anti-Semitism. As to the invincible army, I don't think anybody views Israel's army as invincible anymore. We've seen the reality of this army. It's one thing to use modern technology to murder innocent women and children, helpless men. It's another thing to stand up toe-to-toe against people who are willing to fight you. Hamas has shown that the Israeli army is not invincible. Hezbollah has shown that the Israeli army is not invincible. And Iran has shown that Israel cannot defend itself even with all of the military power that is accumulated. So the myth of invincibility has been forever shattered. And what makes America so strong? We have dominated the world since the end of the Second World War. We control every aspect of global institutions. We have unmatched or had unmatched military power. This will not disappear overnight. What allowed all of this power to have relevance was that the world viewed America as a power that was seeking to do good. The world no longer views America as a power that seeks to do good. They understand that American soft power seeks to simply supplant their own sovereignty with American hegemony. And the American sanctions, the abuse of the dollar to try and control the world has turned its back on this, but it takes time for empires to collapse. And most empires collapse from within, not from external pressures. The United States empire is collapsing as we speak, but it isn't going to happen overnight. And it's imperative for the world to work with the American people to ensure that this collapse is not violent, because a violent collapse of America will resonate not only poorly for the American people, but for the world at large.
Thank you, Scott. Pepe?
For Putin especially, it's extremely tricky to navigate Jewish influence and Zionist influence in Russia. Starting with Israel, the numbers vary. Let's say 1.5 million Russians with double passports living in Israel. This in itself is already an enormous problem because according to the Russian constitution, Russia has to protect these 1.5 million people. But how? Number two, the influence of the Zionist lobby is essentially economic and financial. Some of these oligarchs, as many of you know, they have, let's say, double allegiance. And it's not necessarily Russia that is on top of their priorities. Some of them, some cases are extreme. For instance, they roam around, and then when things get complicated, they use their Russian passport and they come back to Russia. When this happened with Friedman, for instance, basically what we learned is that he got a message from Putin directly saying, look, I'm not going to do anything against you, but there are two conditions. One, you have to prove that Russia is your priority. Two, you have to invest all your funds here in the Russian economy. If you don't follow this, you go to jail. So, this is straight to the point Russian style, right? But this is very complicated because some of these oligarchs are extremely powerful. And Putin is a sort of, he has to compose all the time. This is not an autocracy, as our American friends are saying. This is bullshit. Putin is like a sort of mediator. And I would say that the Security Council reflects the opinion of the ruling classes, let's put it this way. But the oligarchs, they hold substantial chunks of the Russian economy, they are on the table as well. And Putin usually has not so secret meetings with the oligarchs and say, okay, show me the numbers. Where are you investing in? I have enormous projects for development of the Far East and Siberia and the Arctic North. I want you to invest in all these projects. And of course, the double allegiance once again now. So nothing is 100% clear. In China is more complicated because China, as you know, is a pyramid. Everything comes from the Politburo. They decide literally everything. And of course, they would never allow a disproportionate amount of influence of, let's say, the international or Jewish or Zionist combo on politically, obviously not, but on the Russian economy as well. So for instance, if BlackRock has his eyes on China, big time. The Chinese said, okay, come here, you can do this, and that's it. So it's heavily circumscribed, The other question was India, right? Once again, I'm sorry?
In 1 minute.
Yeah, exactly. It's straightforward. Is it the Quad or BRICS and SCO? And they haven't made up their mind yet. Apparently, from what we hear, some very, very good Indian analysts, they are starting to look at BRICS and the SCO much more seriously than a year ago. They see Quad for what it is. I'm sure you saw the latest Quad meeting in Delaware presided by the zombie in the White House, which was an absolute disaster. After that, the India said, oh man, this thing is not going anywhere. But they haven't made up their minds yet. When I say they, it's not Modi, it's the ruling classes, the Indian oligarchs, in fact, because they have, crossroads interests in the American economy. There's a lot of U.S. investment in India as well. So it comes back once again to the financial and geoeconomic reorganization, which only BRICS will be capable of doing. And this will imply India really on the table with Russia and China.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We still don't know. We have to wait 2 weeks to see.
Thank you. Francois?
In 2 minutes, you
2
said.
minutes.
I will repeat نقطتين that I mentioned. خلفية الدعم يعني أغلبية الشعب الفرنسي مع الأسف تجاه دولة إسرائيل، ليس أن هذه الدولة دولة عبرية ويهودية. لب هذا الميل الفرنسي أن دولة إسرائيل عدو للمسلمين. نحب الدولة التي تقاتل المسلمين. What is the background of this hostility toward Muslims? ما هو خلفية هذا الموقف عن المسلمين؟ مثل ما قلت، لا أعتقد أن هناك خلاف ديني فحسب، يعني جزء منه خلاف ديني، لكن عنصرية الفرنسيين تتجاوز حدود الإسلام في فرنسا. إذا أنت من أفريقيا black, you will face the same hostility. ومن جديد الأطراف الدينية في فرنسا الكاثوليكيون ليسوا أسوأ الإسلاموفوبيين. هناك قاسم مشترك أحيانا في ميدان القيم الأخلاق. وبالإضافة إلى ذلك ليس فرنسا بلد مسيحي. صفة الحقيقية لفرنسا بلد ترك المسيحية، ترك الدين. أغلبية الفرنسيين خارج الدين، فليس من الممكن أن تكون لب الخلاف بين المسلمين والفرنسيين قضية دينية. لا أعتقد أن هذه قضية مرتبطة لنهاية الاستعمار. يرفض الفرنسي العادي، يعني أغلبية منهم، وجود واحترام ومساواة مع those who were colonized.
Thank you.
شكرا. Thank you.
Francois, Pepe, Scott, and Muhammad Ali, thank you so much. Please join me in a round of applause for this distinguished panel.
الشكر كذلك للبروفيسور سامي العريان مدير مركز دراسات الإسلام والشؤون العالمية جامعة صباح الدين داعيم على إدارة هذه الجلسة التي لا شك كانت مميزة. أرجو من الإخوة جميعا البقاء في أماكنهم للإعلام للجلسات القادمة. الشكر لكم أنتم كذلك أساتذتي أستاذاتي الكرام والكريمات على صبركم، على حضوركم، على تفانيكم في الجلوس معنا والتفاعل مع هذه الجلسة لا شك التي كانت مميزة والتي تعتبر يعني نقلة نوعية في منتدى كوالالمبور الذي يستضيف اليوم نخبة من أحرار العالم في العالم الغربي الذين شاركوا معنا في هذه المحطة المهمة. وهذا لا شك من فعل ما تركه الطوفان، طوفان الأقصى الذي ليغير اليوم كل المعادلات رأسا على عقب ويصنع عالما جديدا تكون فيه فلسطين هي روح الصراع العالمي، وهي التي تنتصر فيه إرادة البشر الحرة لهذه القضية الحرة التي لا شك أنها تحتاج كل الخيرين وكل أحرار العالم من أجل أن تنتصر السردية الفلسطينية إن شاء الله على السردية الصهيونية، وهذا ما نراه فعلا يتحقق على أرض الواقع. الآن دكتور عبد الرزاق الآن سيكون لنا